The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View, sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee. And if you want, we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to our website at nashuagop.org.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome Dave Wheeler, who is a candidate for District 5 in the Executive Committee.
Pleasure to be here. Carl.
Nice to have you again, Dave. And you've been on the board, the executive board, for several terms now. I think you've had a background of being able to respond. Tell us why you want to continue doing it, and you bring this wealth of experience, I think, is one of them.
Sure, Carl. I've been on the Executive Council for 8 years, almost 8 years, since the year 2000, on and off. And it's a job that I really enjoy. I hope that I'm doing a good job for the people. I think I am. I like to make sure that we are spending our money wisely, the taxpayers' money wisely at the state level, that we're treating money that comes in from the federal government just like it was our money, because it is. It is not free money that comes off of some money tree somewhere. And so we need to look at all contracts, which is one of the major jobs of the Executive Council, is to review state spending contracts. And we've had some good ones over the years, and we've had some that are pretty sketchy. Maybe an example of a contract we reviewed lately that needs desperate change would be the Good News Car contract, where there's a contractor hired to get cars to welfare recipients so that they can get to work. But the way the program's running today, it's evolved into something that costs the taxpayers $7,000 to give away a donated car, or a car we got for free, that's only worth $5,000 when we're done going through it and making sure it's roadworthy. So there's just something very wrong with that business model, and that contract definitely needs to be revisited. And the extra money for that contract remains sitting on the table of the Executive Council. We're going to have to, when that contract is up in a few months, rebid that differently. We need to rethink what we're doing in that area.
Okay, so that's one example of where you think you believe you're saving money, you're having it operate a little bit more effectively too, I believe. There's some others too that you've run into, haven't you?
Sure. The DOT was buying tractors to mow the sides, of the highways.
Right.
And, we have a large state, and I think it was approximately an 18 to 20 equipment purchase over 3 years. They wanted to do a lease purchase. And it just didn't sound to me like it made sense, so I ran the numbers. Is it cheaper for us to lease purchase these tractors over 3 years, pay the interest, pay the insurance, and the other expenses that come along with a lease, or can't we just afford to buy these tractors to mow the highways? And as it turned out, we were able to buy these tractors outright and save $100,000 for the taxpayers over the 3 years. So it's issues and analysis like that we often do at the council, right down to the nitty-gritty, because it seems like oftentimes the devil's in the details.
It is. And so, do you think that we have any inherent problems with the way the state purchases, or?
Well, there's a few things that we've been able to fix in this term. Some agencies were requiring people to purchase a bid bond, or in other words, get bonded just to bid. And some of these projects that they were requiring a bid bond, which is quite a bit of a hassle to get all that paperwork and be bonded just for maybe I'll get this job.
Yeah.
It's one thing to require a performance bond to guarantee that you get a good job
And
with
you
the
do
right
it, yeah.
materials that were specified and such as that. So the council basically set a policy that said unless your job is $38,000 to $40,000 in size, you're not going to require a bid bond, because we weren't getting bidders.
Yeah.
We were getting these low bids because of the amount of paperwork we had put on potential contractors. Just weren't getting people to bid on it, therefore we're getting high prices. So we changed that policy, and now we're getting more bidders.
Let me tell you something that I found in one of my earlier terms up there in the legislature. I went around, I thought that talking to the smaller administrative organizations up there, they have a problem with getting bids for some jobs because they just don't have the experience in their purchasing department. And there's no record of how the possible bidders have performed in past jobs for there's no systematic record that anybody could gain reference to. So I propose that any contract over $10,000 would have a one-page review by whoever was the project leader and is responsible for that, saying that the person who got the contract did the job on time, within budget or over budget, or was late, or whatever problems that might have had, a one-page write-up of the performance of that vendor. And when I tried to work it through the system, I was told that, oh, we're going to have to hire somebody to write the process procedure and all this sort of garbage. Yeah. And it was already set up that all it needed was to add another column to that list of bids that go out on from the state. Just one more column, which has the name of the person who wrote the review and how you could look at the review, so that all these small departments could have a reference point to find out if ABC company did a good job the last time they worked for them.
And I think that's a great idea, and I think most of that burden could fall on the potential bidder. Unlike a bid bond,
right? It's
not too much to ask to say, send me some references. If I'm doing just a small carpet job for a customer, they ask me for references, right. Or I was referenced by a friend or other people. So to check someone's references is basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is a great idea. Some of our bids that are scored are actually scored, and we go through that process. Our larger bids.
The multi-million-dollar ones. Yeah.
Sure, to see if that contractor can perform the service that we want, what experience they have in that field, and then we get that information to review as well and see if we feel that the department scored them fairly.
Do you ever get the scoring challenged by the vendor? Is there, do they claim that the scoring wasn't fair or anything like that?
Well, I think maybe the liquor warehouse
contract that big one, yeah,
would be, and the council didn't approve that. The liquor commission did themselves, but
right.
There was a huge, argument about
right.
whether that warehousing contract for our alcohol and transportation
right.
was fairly scored. And as you know, Law Motor Freight from Nashua got a settlement over that issue, and I think the third vendor that was really in the race to get the job is that's going to get resolved here shortly if it hasn't been already.
But other than that, did you come across any other examples of maybe smaller things, not multi-million-dollar contracts and extensive contracts, time-wise?
The first one I think of that's worth mentioning is an extensive contract. We had a company bid on building the Army National Guard's Training Center in Pembroke. And we actually got phone calls from vendors that had bid on portions of that job and basically saying, you guys are crazy if you hire this contractor. And so we did some of our own independent research, and very reluctantly and not all of us voted for this contract. We hired the builder because it was the last council meeting before the federal funds to portion of that would go away. And we actually brought the contractor in and said, you better do this right. Well, he didn't. And so we ended up at that building tearing out 1/3 of the foundation, too much fly ash, not enough temperature to be, and they didn't keep it from freezing when the pour was happening in the winter with all the fly ash that was in the concrete. And so that contractor actually got fired in the middle of that job, and that was a multi-million-dollar job.
But is there a record now of that, or is it just somebody can remember that type of thing, anecdotally?
Well, the company's now out of business.
Oh.
Because they started to repair the foundation and stuff, and other problems came up, and we just said, that's it, you're done. And to my knowledge, or not, but they had a history in Massachusetts of doing shoddy work.
I see.
And but for us to know that, and for the department heads, I think we learned a lot from that lesson. You got to do a much better screening, getting references.
Well, would you think that's something along the line of what I proposed would be appropriate?
Absolutely appropriate. You would think that it should be being done now
Yeah,
without
that's right.
legislation, right?
I mean, I worked in the industry, that some of these companies, like, they'll take, for example, General Electric. They have a beautiful way of handling all their work and the vendors, and, they know on every job, every delivery throughout General Electric. It's
Sure.
not just any division, how well the vendors perform.
An example of a smaller bid that went awry, we went to replace the metal roofing at the tractor barn in Boscawen for the state nursery. And it's an open ceiling barn. You can look up and see all the rafters and all the structural members up there. And when that bid came to the council, someone dropped the ball and didn't do their job. I recognize that job as being at least double of market price for the materials being used there, and materials were over-specified. I mean, I'm a big fan of life cycle costing, buying stainless steel sanders for the highways instead of regular steel painted that's going to rust out, etc. But this was just way overkill, and something was wrong, so I decided I'm going to take a drive to Boscawen and find out what the deal is. And before I went, I opened up the contract, and they said, in this bid, there's $2,000 to fix rotted wood. So when I got there, of course, I'm on the hunt for rotted wood, and you can see all this from the ground because it's an open ceiling. There was no rotted wood, yet whoever was recommending that contract to the council within the department did not call the contractor, on that portion of the contract. They should have screened that one out. And if they were doing a process and got references, perhaps like you suggested, that wouldn't have even got to the council level, would have been fixed before it got there.
Well, it's interesting to know, because we don't like to just make regulations. We want to do something that would, help smooth this thing and make more effective handling of some of these big projects that we have. I mean, we spend a lot of money in this state, right?
We do. A lot of money. That the executive council approves roughly $500 million every month in spending.
Wow.
Some of it on like a consent calendar item that you have, the keeping the lights on and
some
paying
more
the
routine
payroll
stuff.
and
Yeah.
the more routine stuff, and then the contracts and other items are evaluated much more closely. But it's a lot of our taxpayers' money, and it deserves the scrutiny to make sure it's spent well, to make sure that we're getting the service that we're paying for.
Yeah. And you have relationships you've developed with some of the administration people too. I mean, they get feedback.
And I know this is a controversial contract, but it's worth bearing because I don't think this information is out there in the public, and that would be the Planned Parenthood contract.
Oh, yeah.
People are out there saying that because the council turned down this contract, women are not going to get their services. But what they're not saying is those services, if you're a low-income person, those services are available through Medicaid. It's just that Planned Parenthood is a bad contractor. And Planned Parenthood in the state of Iowa is on trial for $28 million of Medicaid fraud.
Really?
In all the states that have been audited by the Center for Medicaid Services financial audit, not a performance audit, but a financial audit, they have overbilled Medicaid in every state. This is not a contractor that we would do business with if the service was anything other than family planning.
Why didn't we get bids from some of the county offices that handle those services?
You know, this is for particular areas of the state.
Right.
And I'm not sure why no one else bid. Maybe they just thought, well, always had the contract, so we're not going to bid
That's
against them.
what I'm kind of think, yeah.
And if we
Why
step
waste
on
our
their
time?
toes here, then we won't get this contract over there.
Yeah.
I think that there's some of that going on, in the background. But I just want to reiterate, those services that on the first vote of the council were not funded were available to low-income people. It's not like they weren't available. They were just going to get it from a different provider.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I've heard that too. I have a contact in Florida that's in the medical field, and they're telling me not only they have problems with the services, but they charge too much. They charge more than the county services that offer it for the people that are on Medicaid.
yeah, oftentimes you still have to pay.
Yeah.
Just because the state has a dollar in the pot doesn't mean there's no private pay that goes along with it. And the other thing with them, the first vote was in the middle of the Texas with Planned Parenthood and the tapes of Planned Parenthood employees admitting that they sell baby parts. Well, they still deny selling baby parts despite the fact that charges have all been dropped against the guy who was doing the videoing,
Right.
and that the videos speak for themselves. We now have it in writing. The Planned Parenthood sold baby parts to the University of Wisconsin. It's in writing. It's incontrovertible. It's undisputable that they practice those practices. So there's several reasons why Planned Parenthood should not be a contractor with the state of New Hampshire.
So how long are those contracts for? Anyway.
Yeah.
What other examples that you'd like to bring up that you've come across in working on the Executive Council?
Well, I think it would be good maybe to help people understand the type of stuff that we do on the Executive Council. We talked a lot about the contracts, but what does a counselor do in a week?
Yeah.
Is it just that meeting, every other week? I can tell you that within the last month, I've had contact with several families who have had children who are addicted to heroin. And, I really, before this, didn't realize how widespread the problem is. And I've sat down with some of these families and how complicated it gets. What happens when you have an addict who's partially in recovery but not enough to take care of their own child? Where does this child reside? Should they have contact with the mother or father that has an addiction problem or are in treatment or partially recovered? The issues, the family issues involved here are just huge. What happens to the child who steals their parents' vehicle to get money to buy heroin? The heart-wrenching of my child's living with me, do I let them stay and deny there's an addiction here? Do I punish them? Or am I enabling them if I let them stay here and not pull their own weight? Huge emotional, very heart-wrenching decisions. So we've spent a lot of time with that, and what should the state response be? We've increased, the availability of Narcan. We've added lots of dollars for counseling. We've added lots of dollars for enforcement to try to get the drug dealers off the street. And I'm not 100% sure, Carl, what the whole answer is.
Yeah.
I think that all of us are still learning how to respond to this, and these things can help.
Well, it's a
How do we
broad
make this
spectrum
go
of
away?
how you can, yeah.
You know?
I mean, you got to start the education through. You got, several tentacles, I guess, if you might say, that get involved in trying to help these people. And it goes all the way up to continued monitoring after the treatment works so that they don't relapse into the habit again.
It's really a vast problem. Other states to our south, have been doing some of the things that we're just starting to do, and their death numbers are still going up.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to keep a close eye on this. What things are we doing that work? What things are we doing that doesn't work?
Right.
How many times do we give a person Narcan? Are we providing a fix
Yeah.
or a crutch to lean on? I can do this because Narcan is here. And we really need to see what really works. Everybody deserves a second and third chance in this area. This addiction thing is really tough, but the
Yeah,
answers
it is.
the answers are just as tough.
I went to a meeting just last night at Nashua here where Horizon Homes, is it, that is handling
Harbor Homes?
Arbor Homes, excuse me,
Yeah.
Arbor Homes, organizing some non-profit organizations, so they provide a range of services, so you can have a continuum. They have a place where the homeless can live, and some people who are being treated either for mental or addiction could stay after treatment, but it's not very large. So, I mean, it sounds like they got the idea of being much more effective by being able to handle the spectrum of needs for some of these people.
And then you have the whole issue of if they are charged with a crime, they can't, or makes it very difficult
Right.
to get a job,
Mm-hmm.
so that they might rely on
Right.
their habit even more. There's a huge array of issues. It's frankly, it's complicated.
It is very
Yeah.
complicated,
Yeah.
but you can't ignore it. It won't go away.
I know. I know.
So
yeah.
you've been doing this for a while now, so we should expect you to continue.
I hope so.
Okay.
I'm always open to input from the
Uh-huh.
people of the district. Tell me what I'm doing right. Tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Can you help? Can some people help you? Put your signs out, hand out literature, sign wave, or whatever things you're doing?
That's always appreciated.
Okay.
That's
and how do
always
they
appreciated.
contact you?
Yeah. They can contact me at Dave at miracleacresfarm.net.
Mm-hmm.
They can contact the campaign website at davewheeler.org, and we'll get back to them. That's the best way, because if we can always receive those messages if we're on the phone or out of the office.
Okay, and they can also request that maybe their friends in some other areas of your. You have how many towns in your district?
It's huge. It's like
Yeah.
33 towns: Litchfield, Hudson, Nashua, Merrimack, Amherst, Milford, Mount Vernon, all the way almost to Vermont. One town
Really?
short of Vermont, all the way over to Swansea, Troy,
Not Keene, though.
not Keene.
Okay.
No, we don't have the city of Keene anymore.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
quite a bit of traveling for you. You have people in each county that might, each town area that might be able to be called? Or?
We have some heads of towns in different towns, not every town,
Okay.
but we also rely on the Republican committee office in Nashua,
Right.
the Cheshire County committee
Office,
office in Keene, so that we're not always running back and forth. If someone
Yeah.
needs a sign, they don't have to drive to Milford.
That's right. Yeah.
We have campaign materials stationed out in the field. So,
Do you have any meetings that you'll be attending soon?
we have. We're going to be doing a forum with the Lions Club in Antrim, the Lions Club in Wilton.
Uh-huh.
Next week. We're going to the Rivermead Retirement Community in Peterborough. We will be doing the Nashua Rotary Club West.
Uh-huh.
We usually do the other Nashua Rotary Club. I haven't heard anything yet, but I wouldn't be surprised
Okay.
if we're going there as well. We're going to do a forum with the Nashua Nashua Chamber of Commerce.
Uh-huh.
So there's quite a bit of interest in this race this time around, and we'll be out there. It'll be a place where people can ask us questions. put those questions right out there. What's
Okay,
going
well,
on?
what's the top one or two items that they bring up when you go around to these meetings?
I think the opioid crisis is
Yeah.
on people's minds. Um,
We talked about that.
I think if you're in Nashua, I think people want to know whether the train's a good idea or not,
Yeah.
whether we have the money and whether we can afford the train. I think a lot of people are beginning to understand this isn't an issue about can you get to Boston or not.
Right.
We have one of the best, literally, one of the best run, both financially and service-wise, bus services, the Boston Express out of Nashua to Boston, in the country. The Boston Express runs virtually in the black. What happens to the taxpayers' money when or if we put a train in to compete with that bus? So we should just like slow down the bus or
Yeah.
slow down the train and maybe do baby steps.
Uh-huh.
Let's see if we bring that train to the Nashua border if the ridership projections are correct. Because we're talking about spending $500 million for this train. We're going to borrow, federally, we're going to borrow the money, which is still our taxpayer money,
That's right.
and never should be viewed differently. That's taxpayer money, not a free gift from Washington. They had to take it from us first before they
That's
can
right.
send it back with a handling fee usually.
That's right. A big handling fee, at least 20%,
Sure.
I think.
And the way we're doing things in Washington, we're not paying down our national
Right.
debt. The train money will be borrowed money, and we will be paying, unless we change our ways in Washington, we will be paying interest, huge interest on that debt to build that train ad infinitum.
Right.
So the cost is outrageous. And there's no way, there's no tax like the gas tax that keeps building the roads for the buses to drive on,
Right.
or the buses paying the tax. So to be self-supporting. So we really need to think about
Yeah,
need to think about what we're doing there.
the Downeaster still isn't really, it never gets profitable, but I mean, it's still exceeding the subsidy that was planned originally.
They've taken all their pothole money in Maine
Yeah,
and put it into subsidizing that train, and they don't have the money for the roads.
yeah. So that's something that we ought to consider too.
Yes.
Well, Dave, good luck in your campaign, and we hope to see you back solving some of the problems that you've solved in the
Well,
past.
thank you, Carl.
Okay, thank you very much.
All righty.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.